Like,
Yeah.
how do we design some of these places that are less oppressive, where
Yeah.
folks can exist? And so I
Yeah.
don't have any personal like plans to run for any political office or anything,
Yeah.
but some way that I can engage in different level thinking of how we can create better cities, societies, and environments for
Yeah.
folks to thrive. So that can look like policy advisory, some type of policy, or
Mhm.
it could be my own place where we're just trying to figure out how do we redistribute wealth, or
Mhm.
look at what are some areas where we need to create more equity within our communities, to really dialogue across difference. And so I'll tell you this, I don't have an exact role, but I've never been really worried about a title. I've been worried about the work. So I
Yeah.
can tell you about the work that I want to do.
Yeah.
And whatever people call it, you could call me janitor, you could call me CEO. As
Yeah.
long as the work is getting done that I feel called to do, then I'll take on whatever title it is.
Oh, look at you, man! Stop it, Jordan. Jeez, man, come on. Welcome back to Flying 40, project highlighting Black excellence in San Diego, beginning with Black men. And in this episode, I'm pleased to introduce you to Jordan Harrison. He's the son of a preacher with a heart for the community and a gift for communicating. In this conversation, we learn what drives him, what inspires him, and where he's headed. This is Jordan Harrison. Okay, my man.
Yes, sir.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here and to have a discussion.
Yeah. So, as you know, as we've discussed, right, we're having a conversation about Black excellence here in San Diego specifically. We find ourselves in these kind of COVIDian times. I keep saying to folks, this is the strangest of times.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, I'm kind of sweltering in my new home office above my garage here, my little space. I see your fan going over there too, and your space
yep,
too. It's getting hot in
yeah,
San Diego.
yes, sir.
And so, it's been a beautiful time, kind of paradoxically a beautiful time to be able to connect with folks this way and just have real talk about, you know, all that it is to be living in San Diego, to be living in San Diego while Black, and to be living in San Diego while Black and male is the kind of particular iteration that we're in right now with the project with Flying 40. So, I mentioned to you, I came to you in a couple different ways. I saw you, through Reality
Yeah,
Changes and then LinkedIn. And I looked and I'm like, ooh, man, I got to holler at this dude right here. So,
yeah, yeah.
maybe with that as the table setting in the background, can you just tell us, for people that don't have the benefit of having done a little bit of the research I did, who you
Yeah,
are,
yeah,
what you're up to in San Diego, and
yeah.
then we'll just run from there. Just to find out a little bit more about you.
Sounds good. Well, thank you again just for the opportunity and just to sit down and chop it up with you.
Yeah,
And just talk brother to brother. It's just a good
yeah.
space to have and glad to be in community with you. And so, just
Mm.
briefly about myself, born in Chicago,
Mhm.
in San Diego since about late middle school and high school.
Mhm.
Did my undergraduate degree at San Diego State, and
Yeah.
then did my master's over at Harvard.
Mhm.
And all of my work has been centered around community. I work full time at Reality Changers. It's an organization that serves first generation low income students,
Mhm.
primarily based in City Heights, San Diego. Outside of that, doing a lot of talk on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti racism for folks, as well as just like different leadership development aspects. And so I love when folks get those breakthrough moments, when we get aha moments, and we can really change or design our personal life, our community life, and our worlds in a
Mhm.
way that's going to be more sustainable and hopefully lifting for every person that's a part of it. I think part of my orientation, being the son and grandson of pastors,
Mhm.
is really seeing the interconnectedness that we have and the importance of doing work that is going to elevate us while also talking about some of the real struggles that are holding us back every single day.
Mhm. Whew, look at that. Let us go. That's the package
Yes,
right
sir.
there, man. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So tell me how you got to San Diego. So how did your folks,
Yeah.
how did you arrive here?
Yeah. Well, my dad was pastoring a church over in the south side of Chicago, had a
Mhm.
church there, and in Detroit. And my dad moved the churches from there over to San Diego. So our family, plus about another 120, 150 Black families, moved from Chicago, Detroit, over to San Diego, uh, out this way. So it was very interesting. And these are folks that we have grown up with, done life with, and have stayed in touch with. And it's been a blessing being out here.
Whoa. Now, see, I knew a little snapshot, but you didn't tell me that before.
Yeah, yeah,
A hundred
yeah,
and some odd Black folks migrated
yeah.
South Side of Chicago to San Diego?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I need more information. I need more information. So what was that about?
Yeah,
What was that about? What was the call in that? Why was San Diego the spot picked?
yeah,
Then as you after you unpack that though,
yeah,
you know, man, this is going to be interesting to learn about because you
yeah,
find a lot of times, and I'm a Cali kid. I've been born and raised here from up above Santa Barbara. I was in the Bay Area for like a decade, and I came here.
yeah.
But nonetheless, San Diego, doesn't get described as the blackest town in this country
Not at all.
or this state, and so you find folks that migrate here sometimes like, man, like where they at.
Yep,
So
yep,
help me understand those things.
yeah,
What led up to that, and then since having arrived, what that's been like in a San
yeah.
Diego context.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So first we have another pastor who is based out here, and he worked closely with my dad. And they were like, it's time for us to come to San Diego. And I think with things going on in Chicago, as well as I think it was probably a winter day where we had
Mhm.
-degree weather and enough snow. And my dad was like, "All right, Joel, we're gonna take this wave up to San Diego." And I think it speaks to the way that my dad pastored and built community with folks,
Mhm.
where people who had established careers. We're not talking about young folks. We're talking about later 30s, mid 40s, early 50s, moved their entire families, didn't know anybody out here, didn't have any connections, and just trusted my dad and the leadership to start lives out here. And exactly like what you're saying, it was a complete culture shock. Chicago is, especially where we're at, we're a primarily black church
Yeah.
with a lot of black folks in a
Mhm.
black city like Chicago.
Yeah.
To come out here, I remember when I first came out here, students were like, "You talk different," and I was like, "Where's the black people?"
Yeah.
It was just this
Yeah.
interesting dynamic. I was like, "Where's the soul food at? What is this
Yeah.
Mexican?" We couldn't pronounce names
Yeah.
of streets. We were just like, "What
Yeah.
is this place?" But
Yeah.
loved the vision, loved the weather. That was a good thing. But I think that cultural adjustment was major. I will say this though, I think in following my father's lead, he was always big on being embedded in finding the black community and
Mhm.
serving in it in whatever way he can. So one of the first things he did was start a food distribution. The church was based eventually over in Barrio Logan area, so
Mhm.
serving the community there, figuring out like who are the elected officials or folks that we can partner with who are doing things. And so even in a city that doesn't have a large number base of black folks, still connecting with people to still do the work and support the black community that we see here in San Diego and adjacent communities as well.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So how old were you when that you made that transition?
I think I was 13, 12, 13.
13.
Yeah,
So were you going into high school or were you going into eighth grade?
eighth grade.
And that transition, you were also kind of integrating in a way, or like just your whole world view and being with school kids and all that. Was that how was that for you? Just the transition to school for one.
It was everything. I mean, I think I realized more about how Chicago's culture was really something I identified with from the way I dressed, from the way
Mm-hmm.
I talked, to the music that I knew, to the folks that I knew. It was just interesting in San
Mm-hmm.
Diego. And then dealing with seeing more Latinx folks and Latino folks. Like the ones that I primarily saw in Chicago were more times than not Puerto Rican. And so
Yeah.
it was different when I was seeing a large Mexican contingency of folks in
Yeah.
San Diego. And so I think it wasn't anything too strange or anything because my dad always tried to have us in diverse communities.
Yeah.
I think for me though, it was just like, dang, where else do I see the black folks? I remember my first class, there was about 35 students in the class. I was only the black student,
Yeah.
and we had four of the classes. And that whole day, throughout the five classes I went through, I was only in a class with another black student in two of the classes, and it was only three of us at most at a time. And so I just remember being like, and it was down here in Spring Valley, so we're not talking about we didn't come to like La Jolla
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
North
Yeah.
County or anywhere where it's predominantly like
Yeah. Yeah.
a white space. And
Yeah.
so it was just interesting. I just was like, oh dang, all right,
Wow. Wow. So then that comment you made about the importance of embedding yourself in community, I'm coming myself a little late to that game probably. I was talking to you a little bit about that yesterday, right? I am up here. I'm
yeah,
up in Poway.
yeah,
I've been in the biotech community, which is largely Sereno Valley, La Jolla, and the
yeah,
UCSD area. Like that's been most of my world, right?
yeah, yeah,
And as I think about a project like this or how to get closer, I'm sure you're familiar with Brian Stevenson's work and all
yep,
that, right? Just Mercy stuff. I think we ought to talk
very
about that
much
a little
so.
bit. And one of his, primary things is proximity, right? And getting
Yep,
close. So when you talk about your dad embedding and serving, regardless of the numbers, but just getting up close with folks.
yeah,
So how did that? What did that end up looking like? How has You said you came with 100 families, which I'm still just like, I can't even,
Yeah.
the ripples of that on the city, my word. So
Yeah.
how has that unfolded? I got to imagine you're not much more than, you might be mid 20s. I don't know if you're 30 yet or not. I'm
I'm
trying to,
not 30. I'm
yes,
not there yet. I'm not there yet.
you're
Not there
moving
yet.
too. I can see
Yes,
you.
sir.
So let's say 20-ish years, not quite, in this city. Where have you experienced the most kind of black camaraderie and collaboration, just outside of the context of even the church and planting and growing here?
Yeah.
But where, when you say, finding who's who and creating alliances and bridges,
Mhm.
what has that looked like in your experience?
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. I think one of the things I realized in San Diego is there's a lot of black folks doing different work,
Hmm.
but at times it feels like there's very few folks that you're seeing doing different things. And so for me, it was going to places like it's like Southeast San Diego, serving deeply in Southeast San Diego, where there's a large black
Hmm.
population there, aligning with organizations like Paving Great Futures, Fancy does stuff with black women, and I think even for me, it's just linking up with black leaders and just being in community with them.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that I've kind of learned is that I'm not going to be able to support every single organization, but whatever ways I can be a resource, either as a guest speaker, providing some knowledge, providing a plug to something, doing those type of things. I think that was a lens that my family really developed with me in figuring out how can we be part of the community in a meaningful way, while also knowing we have other responsibilities. Like we have families, we have our own personal lives, but really being embedded in the community in a real way was something that my family really was saying was the importance of.
Hmm. So, what drove you towards education? You have a master's in education from Harvard,
Yeah,
which I'm going to
yes,
talk
sir.
about. So,
Yes,
so
sir.
what pushed you that way? What were the pivotal moments that made you go, okay, that's my lane?
Yeah, I think so. We were talking about this briefly. When I graduated from San Diego State, I graduated with 24 job offers in the corporate world from companies like Amazon, Salesforce, companies in Europe. My best offer right outside of college as a 21-year-old was 130K with the Audi and a 10K monthly expense account. And I decided to go work at a nonprofit. I remember when the CEO of the nonprofit found me on LinkedIn, he asked me to come speak, and then when graduation season was coming up, he was like, "Hey, look, I'm not going to be able to offer you nearly as much money as these companies will offer you, but
Mm-hmm.
I challenge you to think if you can make half as much impact." And he kind of hit me in the heart with that one,
We got you.
because
We got you.
because I because right before that, the summer before I graduated, I had done an internship with 3M, and I was living the dream.
Mm-hmm.
I was making close to just $1,500 a week, no tax, no anything. I had a company car. I was traveling DC, Maryland, Virginia, living
Mm-hmm.
out of hotels. I had zero expenses all summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing sales into Home Depots. And I
Yeah.
remember one time at work, I woke up and it was at 2 blocks away from the White House in this penthouse suite. And I was like, this is horrible. I just had this reckoning of my bank account is full, but it feels like there's something lacking in my life, or it feels like I'm not in this alignment, and it feels like there's something that I'm not. This is good. Like I can use my gifts and talents to do this, but I don't feel like this is a place to be. And it wasn't until I was doing the work with Reality Changers when I was invited that got me to stay, because I was like, the money will be great if I went and did these corporate jobs, but there was something about this purpose and calling and education that just led me to stay into it. And as I've done more research on my family, I just realized my grandmother was a teacher, my mom is a teacher. I just come from a family that we're in education and we're in the community. And so I think it's interesting because I think on a historical lens, it
Mm-hmm.
feels like I'm almost more aligned with my ancestors and the folks that went before me, and
Yeah.
I'm more in touch with what I feel like I've really been called to do.
Yes. Whoo, wee, man, that's like goosebumpy good, and that's really. It feels to me, if I'm looking at my own story, it sometimes takes a while to come to those reckonings that you describe, where you have
Yeah,
moments of clarity and can say, "Oh no, actually, my call is over
yeah.
here." So was there anything particular happening in DC? What about it was crunchy or kind of like, "Oh, this doesn't feel right"? What was there something specific, or was it really just like I woke up and was like, "Aha"?
Um, you know, I just felt like, in some ways, I just felt like I was lying to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like the bank account was great. I
Mm-hmm.
was going out to dinner every night, but you
Mm-hmm.
can only go out to dinner so many times alone before you're just like, okay, I'm tired
Yeah.
of this. I just want to
Yeah.
sit home. And it was a great experience. I was a young college student. people
Yeah.
like you to go and explore and do sales, and
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you just like you're flexible. You don't have a family. You can do these
Yeah.
things. And I held those truths, but for me, I was like, this isn't the truth that I think I live. And one of my mentors told me, she was like, look, Jordan, you have to know that you decide where you're going to wake up every morning.
Yeah.
Other people can have different convictions. Other people can have
Yeah.
different feelings, but you have to live with your life and your convictions. And if there's a level of um, inauthenticity, you need to
Yeah.
honor that
Yeah.
and figure out what are places that you feel more aligned. And so I just remember when I woke up in that DC hotel, I looked at my two suitcases, and I just was like, this is great. I just don't think that I can do this with my life. And that decision, I probably lost about 5 or 6 mentors because they were like, hey, look, community service is great, but do that on the weekend. Go get your money now, set yourself up. But I think they had great intentions. And I
Mm.
think they really were supportive of me doing work, but they were like, don't work at a nonprofit. Do that as an afterthought. Go get your business acumen. Go do that, and then go serve the community later. And at 21, I just was like, I gotta do what's right for me.
Wow. Wow. So talk to me a little bit about this mentors thing, because that's, the spirit of that is embedded in this project as well, right? So to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
extent that many of us don't see models that we can model,
yeah, yeah.
um, that's is born out of that. For
Hmm.
anybody who is in their particular grind or in their lane, if we can create examples for folks to just catch a glimpse of themselves and say, "Ooh, if
Yeah,
that, well,
yeah,
I recognize that story. I've been there too. I see that. And if that person went from there to there, then well, let me go see. That we know so strongly how important those kinds of examples are. So, how have you, what's that look like for you today? Are you really intentional about cultivating mentorship in your life?
hmm,
And what models do you look at and follow
yeah,
on
yeah.
purpose?
I have quite a few mentors in my life now. I think that season of losing mentors
Mm,
just taught me how important it is to make sure you know who you're allowing to kind of mentor you and
mm,
what wisdom that they're bringing to you, and even how they're seeing success. Because I think for some folks back then, they never had malintent or anything.
mm,
They just were like, logically, it makes sense for you to go take this job where you're going to make 3 times as much as what you're going to make
mm,
and worry about the community. And so I never faulted any of them for it. But I think I just learned from that being very careful with who we're allowing to mentor us, and
mm,
knowing every mentor doesn't necessarily need to speak into every part of your life. Maybe
mm,
there might be some mentors for your professional development, some for your financial literacy or financial development, maybe some for your commercial real estate license or things you're trying to do there, maybe some for effective relationships, and
mm,
really knowing what are the expertise or knowledge gaps that you have, and then who are the right mentors you can call in for spaces, and being careful not to let any person just give you any type of wisdom in
mm,
every area. And so I think that's just one thing that I've learned in how I kind of structure my life now, where I know specific people who I'll call into and tap into for
yeah,
specific challenges. Because I know some folks might give me something that might not be aligned with me,
mm,
and just to be careful of that, because I think I realize in my own life sometimes we can bring on unnecessary stress when we have the wrong mentor, thinking that they're saying the right thing into our life when we're
mhm,
not even on that same lane. And so I
mhm.
think it can be very helpful just knowing how
Yeah,
is the best way to,
yeah, yeah.
while also not being self-fulfilling and everything, like saying I
Mhm,
just need it one way as well.
mhm. Mm. So this, what you're talking about is like, as church folk would say, discernment, right? And
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes,
how
sir.
you do that. That's a thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say, you kind of keep surprising me in your youth, to be speaking this way.
Yes, sir.
But what is it that has helped you cultivate that love, that kind of, well, so I don't want to leave to the mentoring thing too quick either. I do want to
Yeah.
ask you kind of who you've intentionally sought, or what areas or gaps you've identified where you have looked for mentoring, and how you went
Mhm,
about doing that. So I'm curious about that.
mhm,
But before you answer that, just your self-awareness and how you go about kind of settling on what's right for you.
yeah.
What would you say about that? What does that look like?
I think for me, it's been two things. I think it's been my walk with God, growing up in church, just having solid values or solid things that I know, um, leaning into values to make decisions, and just knowing, okay, here's who I am. And I think in grad school, my grad school program it was counseling informed, and it was really big on reflective learning. And so I did a lot of work and just thinking about how has my racialized identity been informed? How have my experiences since I'm young kind of informed me on this? What
Mhm,
ways have I internalized ideas of individualism and competition and things like that, to really just be aware of how some societal values and norms I've internalized, and then doing that work to say, is this something that I hold? One of the first things that I kind of been challenged with, I grew up in a very competitive younger brother. I
Mm-hmm.
had an older brother who just wanted everything. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I feel like part of the reason why I'm successful in life is because my older brother got so much like just shine that my whole life was like, I'm gonna get more than you, bro. So I just came up, I just was like, you're not gonna win at everything, so I'm gonna do it.
You know what? No, for real. My buddy, the guy that started the reason, the conversation that started the thing that we're doing right now,
Yeah,
my boy Brian Favors, youngest of three boys, all
yeah,
football players. And
yeah.
man, that thing you're talking about where you just scrap and fight for a spotlight for a minute,
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
his whole thing. I see it so much. So I relate. I get what you're
Yeah,
saying.
I'm telling you, that's what did it for me. Like just having an older brother who always kept winning at everything. One in track meets, one in basketball, was
Yeah.
best in relationships, had a perfect smile. I just was like, dude, like, and because we were 4 years apart, anytime I came up after him, all the teachers would be like, "Oh, you're Brandon's little brother." I was like, if I go through my whole life as this guy's little brother, I am gonna have a whole identity crisis. I think that fueled some of my initial success. But I think sometimes I see it across many folks where either you've been counted out, or you've been not seen, or you've been invisible, or you've been seen as only in relation to something else and not you as an individual. And a lot of folks are able to kind of hold that frustration and use that as fuel to say, this is why you will see me, because although I am a part of this, I am showing you exactly why this is why I'm standing different, although I am connected to it.
Woo! So I was just having this conversation last night. We went to a socially distant dinner with some friends of ours.
Nice.
We cooked some fish and we sat out back. And we were talking about this. I was invited to some conversations right around George Floyd with some young brothers, and it was a couple, elder-ish cats. I guess I'm starting to eclipse into that zone when I show up in that way.
Yeah.
And but one of the questions towards the end of the conversation was, what's one of the key challenges and key opportunities of black life, being black and male in this country? And a lot of the responses were just what you said right there. The simultaneous sense of being counted out or unseen or undervalued when you step into space, and then the opportunity to be like, you thought you knew. Oh, yeah, you thought you knew, but watch, and to take that as fuel for the come up, for the well, no, but
Yeah.
now watch. Now I know, there's a whole thing we could talk about that, like why that's even set up that way, or brothers even having to worry about that or move in those spaces. The injustice of all that is a whole conversation, and the ways systems are set up to create that, and how many cats don't make it over that hurdle, don't see that as an opportunity, but really are pushed back on their heels, and and beat down from that kind of reality. But but at the same time, yeah, I hear you. I hear how you can kind of flip that. With the right support and mindset, right? You can kind of get on top of some of that sometimes.
And I think to that though, there's a lot there to unpack. Just on societal values, I was doing a workshop this morning on anti-racism with some educators, and there's some research just around how, particularly in college, and particularly our men of color, and then even particularly our black men, how we
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes don't exhibit what research suggests is like help-seeking behavior, where oftentimes we as men don't know how, or don't ask for help, because either we've been socialized to see asking for help as weakness, or it's not something that men do, and particularly in the black men mental health space. I mean, I grew up in, and asking for help at times can be associated with weakness.
Yeah.
And then you're not a man if you're asking for help, but how that can carry through in all these different ways, to where there's probably a lot of pit holes that we could avoid if we're able to work through that.
Yeah.
I'm good. I don't need you, and I'm trying to do this by myself.
Man. Whew, we could riff on this for a long time, like this
Yes,
whole
sir.
thing. So
Yes, sir.
so so speaking. So let's come back to the mentor thing for just a second, because we just hit
Yeah.
it right. Like, some kind of way you feel receptive to and even proactively seek help.
Mhm.
And so, where have you been intentional about mentoring? Like, where have you gone looking for mentors historically?
I think I pull them from everywhere. I think in grad school, I pulled some folks in, and I just And I'm kind of I've gotten to a place now where I'm not ashamed to ask for it, and even more so, sometimes I don't even ask people for like specific help. I'll just add them. This is like one of my tricks, I guess, is on an email list. Well, I'll just say, hey, let me just give you an update on my life every 3 months. Ask you some questions that I feel like will be helpful. And so, but I think to your point, one of the things that it starts with for me though is knowing what are areas that I want to develop. When I first got out of undergrad, I got a mentor who was in the finance industry through a connection in Rotary,
Mhm.
who was just helping me understand stocks and investments and Roth IRAs and all these other things.
Yeah.
And he was willing to meet me where I was at, put
Mhm.
time in, really break down concepts to me,
Mhm.
and I really appreciated that. And so I think, what's actually interesting. I think I've realized more. A lot of people offer help. Few folks follow up to get it.
Mm.
I've been in a lot of workshops or heard keynote speakers or had guest lecturers or had folks that say, and we say it a lot, I think, we say, yo, if you need anything, let me know.
Mhm.
The hard part is a lot of us don't follow up or
Yeah.
we don't know how to follow up.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I've just realized that victory is often in the follow up.
Mm.
And so sometimes I'll just have that initial conversation. It'll kind of be like dating. I'll be like, okay, is this a match? But to me, I'm like, if anything, I'm getting to know a person and just seeing where they're at. And if they might not help me now, let me at least stay connected enough because maybe 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the line, there
Mhm.
might be something that we can mutually help each other with, or they can help me in some way.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm the same way.
Yeah,
So, and I don't know if it's, extrovert, introvert. It might be some of that. I'm kind of wired for doing these kinds of things, jumping
yeah,
into conversations and things like that.
yeah.
And it's funny because I'm in scientific spaces, right? So I'm often helping broker between more introverted, classically sciencey folk into things that make sense business wise and trying to, but I really enjoy that space. I'm married to an introvert too, so the value that folks that are more reflective and analytical and kind of, it's interesting how much we kind of need both pieces.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so race,
Yes, sir. Let's
this
go there.
conversation, how have you, you know, empowered yourself to have that conversation in mixed spaces, and what's that journey been like? How has that shaped you just in the country, but in this town, and then in what you're doing today? Because even when I look at reality changers, to be real with you, there's not a whole lot of black folks in that, like I'm, and I know we're in San Diego, right? So that we
Yeah,
all are used to that often, right?
yeah,
Being the one.
yeah.
So, you know, talk to me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know where to start. Where should I start? Like, I don't even know. I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Like how, um, what empowers you to be? So you said you have inclusion and diversity conversations.
hmm
And what I have found is oftentimes like the token brother in the room, that's the one, will be asked to broker that space for people.
hmm
And I have had allies, friends of mine, get protective of me for being the representative that needs to hold down the black voice in a space.
hmm
Particularly these days, you're getting a lot more wokeness and folks
Yeah,
recognizing
you say
what
that.
their work is. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
okay, I don't need to be asking and putting upon my black brothers and sisters to broker this for me. I'm gonna do this work myself. And so you have white folks trying to get with other white folks to do that. But for me, I was telling you the other day, mom's white, wife's white. Like I find myself in these. I'm this in between person, just biologically.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't mind being standing in that space.
yeah,
I'm curious about for you how that's been. Like, do you raise your hand? Do you feel comfortable in that space? Do you ever draw back from it? How is the in where we're at right now, right? We're in the middle of 2020, all this super polarized racial dynamic everywhere. San Diego's not devoid of it. We've got video too of cops harassing black folks here. So how is that sitting with you? Are you showing up to have the conversation and being helpful, or are you like over it? How has that been settling on you in the work that you do?
yeah. I think I think it's a mix of both. I
Mm,
feel like every day is a different battle. Just seeing where my emotional capacity is.
yeah.
I think at the heat of it, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, there was a lot of just exhaustion because during that season, we talked about my father was also passed in that season, so that was tough. But I think my dad was also a Black Studies professor, And so my dad was always having conversations with me around blackness, being black, and what solidarity looks like with folks who are not black. And so for me, I think for whatever reason, I have a extra dose of grace, or what some would call patience, to sit with what is just some straight ignorance sometimes, and to walk folks through it. And also, though, I would also say I speak very uncomfortable truths to folks now, very freely. Where I think, to me, I'm also very careful of the fact, and aware of the fact that I'm a black man who went to Harvard, which to a lot of white people would make me one of the good black people, one of the good black folks, the ideal black person that we would want in America. And so I'm always conscious of making sure that that identity is not something that allows particularly white folks or non-black folks to be like, well, you're like the good ones. I'm like, no, we need to see black as just you being black means that you're good, whether you wear a do-rag or not, whether you have a Harvard or not, whether you went to trade school or not. Your existence alone is what matters. And so for me, I think sometimes some of the ignorant comments, or just some of the uninformed knowledge that people have, can be frustrating. But I think I also hold the fact that people are socialized in America. And if you grew up in a space where it was all white picket fence in a certain racial group, and you never had experience or understandings of what blackness or black folks are, I can understand that. I just might not be the one to walk you through that conversation. I might suggest someone else for you.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm very picky with what conversations I'll engage with. Is it going to be productive? Is this just a space for people just to throw up and be mad at each other? Or are we really trying to get to some solutions? Because sometimes I think some folks come into conversations like this and they just want to argue their points and not listen to each other. Or they just want to say, well, this is why this is wrong and this is why this is right. And I'm like, I'm here for us to have a productive conversation. One of the things I did this past spring with the Posse Foundation, I kind of got to tour 3 or 4 different universities. We did a 3-day leadership conference of how do we talk about politics, but not Democrat, Republican. How do we talk about how we talk about politics? How do we talk about our values? How do we talk about blackness? How do we talk about race? How do we talk about these things? And every one of these conferences had between 150 to 300 young folks in college coming together to really figure out how do we actually dialogue and talk about these things. Because we're always going to have some disagreement, or there might be some ignorance, or there's going to be something, and we still are going to coexist in the world together. So what does that mean, and how do we productively do it?
Woo, so preach, man. Come on. I'm taking notes, bro. So what, so real talk though. So, I was telling you this story, right? So imagine me in a 60,000 person multinational med tech, biotech type organization on a diversity committee that advises the CEO of this organization, creating diversity and inclusion strategies and giving unconscious bias coaching all the time, setting up employee resource groups and helping folks broker all those conversations about, getting mentors and champions and moving through corporate spaces, right? And at some point, I think I was like, I don't know, so there are inevitable kind of posts you go through, milestones. One is like, okay, this is cool conversation to have when everyone's triggered and something goes off, and the Michael Brown happens, Ferguson happens, something happens, and everyone's front and center. I think encouraging and supporting people in the marathon that is this work, in the reality that there is no light switch, and trying to find small wins, and I even hesitate when I say small, but like that work is no joke, right? This marathon, like social justice, this is like lifetime work stuff. Put on your shoes and get hydrated in your nutrition, and we're gonna be here for a while.
Yeah.
Where have you found? Because what invariably now comes up for me, for folks that know all that history that I just told you, is like, what would you do if you had $1 billion? Where would you put it, or what's the solution? What do we do? I want to fix it. A lot of my white friends will say that. Where do you find those glimmers? Because I'm listening to you talk about you've got extra helpings of grace, and you've got all this discernment on board, and you're self-conscious and aware enough to know that the package you might get put in as someone that was educated at Harvard might look like a certain thing, but you kind of correct it to, no, this is really what's happening. But where, this is really leading up to me almost asking you the same question people ask me. where do you find solid ground or places where there it feels right? Like, okay, this is what coexisting might look like. This is what, you know, how we might do this. These are models for how we might mend some of these fractures.
Yeah.
You follow me? Where do you end up? What feel what where do you get juice? What feels kind of like, okay, this is an area where I want to keep talking into.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if you want me to like name specific spaces where I feel like it exists in San Diego, or
Anything, whatever comes up when I say that. Like, where do you find hope in all this dialogue?
yeah, I think for me, I think it starts by looking back at my history
Mm-hmm.
and just knowing what my ancestors went through more. That I just feel like this is just going to give me the juice to get through this because this is nonsense. But then I'm reminded of my grandfather telling me stories of having the KKK burn a cross on his front lawn, or his father, who was fighting for NAACP rights for voting rights, got put a gun at his face when he was trying to vote. And so I think I carry some of those stories and those energies with me in the work that I do now. And then I think the beauty of the work that I do now with reality changers is I am kind of able to be around spaces where we have folks of every race, creed,
Mm-hmm.
background coming together to fight oppression and to create new realities. And so I think every day, I think for me, my students are the greatest victories in
Yeah.
terms of just being able to walk with them through life. Being at Reality Changers now for over 7 years, I've seen students who have experienced horrible situations, lived in motels, were homeless. Um, Average family income for family of four is about $26,000, and they're making it work. And just to be able to walk with them, and for them families to thank me, to say, hey, like, thank you for doing this. I'm like, yo, I am just here to walk and to co-labor alongside you. So I think I see hope in those spaces. And I think the beauty of that my work is that I'm able to operate in both, where I can go and speak to spaces that aren't like this, but I can also be rested or grounded in a space where we're not perfect, but we're gently working towards it. We're having tutors and volunteers that are coming in of different race and creeds, and we talk very honestly about systemic racism, institutionalized racism, internalized racism, anti-blackness, all these things, and we name it, and we understand this simple concept that this work of 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 understanding and tackling racism and anti-blackness is grounded in this concept of love, of
Mm-hmm.
real transformative love, of how do we understand and see the humanities and the identities of different folks, and how can we honor that. And so I think for me, it's just this solid grounding. It's like I love when folks can walk in and feel affirmed. They don't have to like they have to hide anything or not be themselves. And so I think at Reality Changers, that's a space where we strive to have that. And then I have a lot of peers where we just sometimes we just talk about reimagining the world, and we sit with the frustrations of the realities of what it is now. But then we also know, we understand that in our life, the thing Martin Luther King talks about, the arc of justice will slowly bend. And when we think of folks like John Lewis and folks who have carried some of that weight, I just see it as this is my time to pass the baton. And I'll close with just being mindful of my own energy and my own capacity to engage with stuff to make sure I can still show up in different spaces. Because as much as I want to say yes to some of these spaces, sometimes it's your ability really to say, you know what, I'm gonna take a time out. I'm good. I'll catch you all later.
Mm. Oh man, man! There was a soundbite in there. In my mind, I'm thinking about the trailer for our conversation, and that grounded in love, peace, and having like deeply safe spaces where people are affirmed and being able to kind of operate from that
Yeah,
recognition. Because in a way, you're kind of, to use another kind of churchy language, that kingdom building that you're in all the time, that you kind of felt called into when your bank account was full, but your capacity to give wasn't so much, and so to start
yeah,
from there and then go out
yeah,
and have conversations because you've been kind of steeped in that
yeah. And
is
and, and I
beautiful.
think and I think to close out that point, I think I've even recently just really been thinking about this concept of love, because I think we use love, I think, so freely in some ways, where I think sometimes it's really hard to understand when what the love of justice looks like, what it means to stand arm in arm and side by someone, where love for sometimes might just mean you taking a step back, you giving up your time, like the sacrificial love that it takes for justice to occur, whether that means you giving up a position, or you being able to say something that might make you lose your job, or you calling out a friend and you might lose a friendship, or you calling out a family member, like that type of sacrificial love where it's not just I love you enough to see you, but I'll love you enough to fight for you, even if it means I might get hurt in the process. That type of love that grounds us in the progress that we need for our society and humanity.
Ooh, ooh, come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, bro. Seriously. I mean, I'm like goosebumpy good, you know? Man, oh man, I had a text. We got a text in this house yesterday. I'm like teary as I'm talking to you about that, about a sister that was involved in an organization and she felt a certain kind of way about it, was that way it was structured and led, and spoke into it and lost her job as a result because she was, you know, taking a stand in a way that was uncomfortable. And these are like friendly people that she's been journeying with for a while. And we you know, were talking about it last week, and then earlier this week actually, and then got the text today that yeah, you know, it kind of went down, so to speak. And so, and it's, you know, but she's at peace with it because she knows she was coming from that place, where like a loving place that'll do the thing, right? And what then? So I'm hearing you say that the environment of reality changers is really sustaining and clarifying for you and helps you kind of move from there. Talk to me a little. We've had a little bit of this race conversation. What does, and you've spoken in, you know, you're a PK, a double PK, you know, pastor's kid's kid.
Yeah, 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 that's true.
So, you know, how is that? How does that play out for you? Is that, you know, where does that sit in your life? Are you, what does that look like practically? You know, how do you weave that into your day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I think day to day, I'm just praying and reading the Bible. I'm at church on Sundays. I think I'm grounded in it, and I use it as fuel to sustain me. I think I grew up in learning the scriptures as a way to encourage you and to ground me, and so I think that's something that's, you know, in my heart forever.
Yeah.
So I think it's grounded. I'm definitely not as involved as I think my mom would like me to be, and I think she still has a come on, you got a pastor calling in your life. I'm like, that's okay. And I think even as a PK, coming to terms with being okay with that.
Yeah.
And being okay with like, hey, I'm kind of seeing my pulpit or my place of ministry is out in the community.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have folks that are inside the church talking to people and helping them develop their spiritual lives.
Mhm.
And we need folks outside that are just working with folks that are just trying to make it day in and day out. And I think regardless, the common denominator, especially when we're talking about disenfranchised communities,
Yeah.
is what keeps us oftentimes going on the day in and day out is faith.
Yeah.
Whether it's faith in God,
Yeah.
whether it's faith in tomorrow, the paycheck will come, whether it's faith in like the food will show up, the underlying kind of dimension in our resilience is this sense of faith. And so I think whether you're talking about God or how you interpret God to be, or whether you're talking about I'm just trying to get to my next check and I don't know how long this pasta and rice is going to work, you are relying on some type of faith
Yeah.
that's letting you get up every single day. Because the opposite of a life without faith would just be apathy and almost purposelessness. Because it would say, what's the point of even trying if there's nothing I can even get?
Mm, mm, mm. I agree. I agree. I agree. I agree, man. So tell me this then. So where does all this go then for you? So,
Yeah.
you know, this is like a rich story as I come to you, and I'm so curious about when you just mentioned, you know, you hang with your peers and reimagine the world. So what's possible, or what do you know, what are you about? What are you trying to get after?
You know, I think just continued work. I think I want to continue to start thinking about different levels of systems and how we can change things. So whether that's looking at what is effective policy and thinking, I'm really interested in larger environments,
Mm-hmm.
right? So my start is with one-on-one student and family. Now I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to think, okay, what does that mean as a region? What does it mean as a state? Like,
Yeah.
how do we design some of these places that are less oppressive, where
Yeah.
folks can exist? And so I
Yeah.
don't have any personal like plans to run for any political office or anything, but some way that I can engage in different level thinking of how we can create better cities, societies, and environments for
Yeah.
folks to thrive. So that can look like policy advisory, some type of policy, or it could be my own place where we're just trying to figure out how do we redistribute wealth, or look at what are some areas where we need to create more equity within our communities to really dialogue across difference. And so I'll tell you this, I don't have an exact role, but I've never been really worried about a title. I've been worried about the work. So I
Yeah.
can tell you about the work that I want to do.
Yeah.
And whatever people call it, you can call me janitor, you can call me CEO, as long as the work is getting done that I feel called to do, then I'll take on whatever title it is.
Oh, look at you, man! Stop it, Jordan. Jeez, man, come on. Oh man, that's good. That's good. That's good. So okay, pivot. I'm gonna pivot for a minute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What's the album or artist that you have heard the most? Now, this is not necessarily. This isn't the same question as who's your favorite artist. This is what has literally
Okay.
entered your ear, either artist or album or even song, the most in your life.
Oh man, I'll tell you. I'll tell you this song. In grad school, I was playing Big Sean's "Bigger Than Me" actually, because I actually wanted to quit grad school, and
Ooh.
before, while I was going in, I was playing this song because I was really trying to be mindful of the students and families and the stories that were on my back. And I
Mm.
think, although I can get a lot of personal accolades, I'm
Mm.
always centered on being grounded in humility and knowing that even whatever success I get or don't get, I'm always reminding myself of this is a bigger purpose that you're fighting for, a bigger cause that you're trying to speak into, and
Mm.
never getting caught up in my own ego or wanting to see my name on the front of a website. And
Yeah.
so that song kept me grounded because the chorus just goes like, "I just want to make my city proud," and it just
Mm.
really was grounded, reminding me about like my family, my
Yeah.
community, and where
Yeah.
I come from.
Yeah.
Because I know me being at Harvard, it wasn't just for me. It was so many folks that said like,
Yeah.
I spanked Jordan when he was little. I talked to him. I did something. So I'm like, well, let's do this together. Let's change
Yeah.
what we see as possible for ourselves.
Oh man, that's so real. That's so real. So do you claim San Diego as your spot, or like what when you say home? What's up?
So this is tough because my family will say, "You from San Diego now?" Because it's hard because I also think like 55 degrees is cold now, so Chicago will definitely not claim me. But I go back there 2 or 3 times a year to visit
Okay.
family.
Okay.
But I will say home is definitely San Diego now
Okay.
because I'm here a lot more and doing a lot more work here. I'm definitely distant from Chicago, but I
Yes.
go back there 2 or 3 times a year just to visit and say hello to family as much as I can.
Yes. Okay. All right. I pivoted there for just a minute because you mentioned it in your response to my music question, and the reason I was asking that when I was looking at your bio on LinkedIn, I saw the rhyme something or other, the
Yeah,
Brown alumni that you put
yeah,
linked on there, and Big Sean was on there actually
yes
too.
sir, yes sir.
So so forget that song in particular. Who do you like? Like what's your jam?
My dad brought me up on oldies, Earth, Wind, and Fire, everything, like anything that's old. I'm a drummer, so I love smooth
Ooh,
jazz. So I actually play like Dave Matthews Band or anything I'll be listening to. Like
ooh.
I, I am all over the board. I love R&B recently.
Yes.
I just, but I,
So I got to tell you then, since you just said you're a drummer, there's I'm doing my little research around town trying to find models of black excellence. That's how you and I got up.
yes, sir.
The most recent ex CEO of Jack in the Box is a dude named Lenny Kama. Lenny Kama has 3 boys, and they got a little group, and they call themselves We the Kamas. And they call their brand of music. They're like these black surfers from San Diego, man. So
Interesting.
I'm trying to bring you into getting more comfortable with your San Diego black self. You got to go check them out. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. I got 2 videos.
Oh no, oh
Seriously,
no.
I was like, oh wow, look at this right here. I'm telling you, it's
I have to check that out.
yeah, I'll
Black,
send you a link. It's a beautiful thing. But
please do, please do.
I get San Diego is such a town of migrants in a way. It feels rare that you come across folks that came up, that have generational ties. It's like this port city and the naval presence and military presence. It feels like it just lends itself to a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I'm actually looking for more. I'm looking for more personalities that have been here, for generations, and haven't yet come to that. So tell me a little bit about and I know we're going to get to the hour here in a minute. I don't want to keep you the whole time. We got like 10 minutes. So Boston, Harvard.
Yeah, yeah.
You say, 2 years, 2 years.
It was a 1 year program, 9 months in and out. We're done.
Ooh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
So what was that like?
it was like something I never experienced. I never thought. I mean, I went to San Diego State. Never
Mm,
thought I'd go to Harvard.
mm,
Someone convinced me to apply, and the blessing was I got a full ride there too. So they covered my. I was one of 7 students to get a full ride there my year.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, I think I just realized. I think that was an interesting conversation just on like privilege
Yeah.
and different things because just the proximity when you're in that space to
Yeah.
celebrities or politicians or CEOs, like, and just, we say that it's if you drop the Harvard name, especially the farther you get away from Boston, it just carries so much weight. Folks be thinking I'm a lot smarter than I am. I'm like, I only went there for 9 months. I can't do much. So I only took like 7 classes, so I can't figure out everything. Um, it was powerful, and I think too, I also held deeply like an imposter syndrome when I was there when I first got there.
Mhm.
I think being a black man at Harvard,
Mhm.
I remember there were just times I walk around campus and I was just like, this. It feels surreal. Like I
Mhm.
don't feel like this is actually like how did this end
Yeah,
up here?
how this
Like this doesn't
happened.
any type of sense. But there's a phenomenal black community I was able to connect with.
Yeah.
And it's also situated in Cambridge and outside of that Boston, which was rated as one of the top racist cities in America. So
I
it was
know.
just it
I
was
know.
something else.
Yeah.
Um, and you have huge wealth disparity. I think the
Mhm.
average family black income in Boston was like $8. Not income. The average family wealth was $8, and then for the white family it was like $115,000 or something. There's like an article I'll
Wow.
send to on that, and that article had just populated, and so it's
Wow.
interesting
Mhm.
being at like a hub where you have Harvard, MIT, Berkeley School of Music, and still seeing on the outskirts of the city, you're still dealing with homelessness, where people experiencing homelessness. We're still dealing with some of our most social and just places. And I just remember sitting with some of the tensions of at a place that's still so resource rich, right
Mhm.
outside of the gates, we have folks that are sleeping against the gates for
Yeah.
a warm place at night. And it's just interesting. And so I think I love the fact that I was able to go there. I love what it says for my family and what I can pass on as far as generational knowledge. And also I think I try and hold folks, the institution and people I know, it's like, hey,
Mhm.
it's a place and it's problematic in some ways too, but it was a blessing to be there.
Mm. Mm. Man. Yeah. My goodness. I remember I went away. I went to Davis, so I left my little hometown and went away.
Yeah,
And you know, just that leaving your roots thing. I mean, forget the grades and the education. Sometimes just that being away and trying to figure out how to live. I think is an experience that folks should have.
oh, yeah.
Uh,
Especially
so
in Boston, where it's like we had like 16 inches of snow. I remember sometimes somebody was walking down my street with some skis on, and I was just like, "This is ridiculous." I was like, "Because this is why I can't claim Chicago anymore." One of the stories that happened was because I haven't seen snow because I want to go to Chicago in the winter. I just avoided that for
yeah.
about by that time it was like 12, 13 years. My roommate had a car, and we just had a snowstorm, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna shovel my car out. Do you want to help?" My goofy self was like, "That sounds great." An hour later, shoveling that stuff in the car, I was like, in 19-degree weather, I was just like, this is, y'all
That's
got me.
not okay.
I'm not doing this one again.
Yeah, I'm stuck in San Diego. I mean, I'm already in California, so it's I can't really I can't say anything about anything that's really weather, but
Yeah, yeah,
sunshine and the waves are definitely my thing. The touch and you mentioned your um, dad a lot, and you mentioned for a blip here that he just passed,
yeah.
and I would feel remiss if I didn't land on that for just a second and ask you, well, one, how you are doing in that, and then kind of what I've sometimes asked folks just when we're at dinners or hanging around, like, what is the unspoken message your parents have given you, whether they said it explicitly or not. Like for example, from my dad would just in his life story, the thing I hear is be curious, and from my mom I hear like be prepared. Everything that comes out of her mouth in one way or another is coming from that place. So yeah, well, how are you? This is like months into your father being passed, and you're a young man. So I'm curious about how you are, and then what it is that's with you, in your ear from your dad.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate you making the time in this space and asking that. It's definitely been easily one of the hardest, if not the hardest thing to deal with, especially from that moment. And because it was a complete shock. I just saw my father the night before he had passed, and I was just kicking it with him, and then I left, and my mom calls the next morning, and she's like, "Oh, they're leaving him." And so I think that was incredibly hard. And he was only 64. And so I think that was a challenge, and just the reminder of. And then I shared 2 months after my grandfather passed, and he was 94, so it was a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more okay, but it was still unexpected. But he was able to live a fuller life in terms of age wise, and I think my dad said a lot. My dad was a preacher. I've been listening to like all his sermons now, just trying to get an inkling of his voice again. I think my dad just was always big on just trusting God, and he had something. My dad was also big on. He did a lot of things on alcoholism and counseling and different things for folks. And the saying I hold that he said was just um, face the condition and change the conclusion. And I think he was always intentional about naming the conditions that we're in, but always being joyful and faithful enough or happy enough. My dad was just like ridiculously joyful, and I was just like, or a black man from Chicago who has stories of like just of ridiculous racism, but his like defiant joy, even in the midst of an understandable of you could be broken down, is I think something that I hold on. And I think about the moments of my father. He was always joyful. Him and my mom married 30 plus years happily, and he just trusted God through it all. I think those would have been some of the messages that he would have. And then at the end, he probably would have said, "Don't get caught slipping." And just like my dad was also a black man from Chicago who was also very well prepared for any situation, and so my dad was also like, "Don't get caught slipping." So I think the hood side would come out and be like, "All right, son, like, don't." So I think those would be some of the core messages that I've just been holding on from him. And I'll tell you this, I think now it's just a joy to speak about him and to speak life about the legacy he left and how I get to enact and carry on the phenomenal things that he put in myself and my brother and those who will come after him.
Bruh, on that note, man, really, I feel like I'm talking to a piece of him and not having ever met him, but by virtue of sitting here with you, I am indebted and feel kind of blessed um, that he was here because you're here, and I can't wait to see what happens next, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Of course, thank you for the time. This is a phenomenal project, and glad just to see another black man doing great work in San Diego, even if you're in Poway.
No, don't hold it against me, man. Don't hold it against me.
Not at all. Not at all. Much love. And just, I'll say this as a closing note too. I think especially as the signs that we're seeing as black men, I think, there's a lot more conversations and there's depth to this, right? Talking about blackness and things like that. But I'll tell you, I'm never going to be a stumbling block to someone doing good work with the beautiful ego and a humble heart doing it. So I think I'm always glad to partner with folks that are more worried about how are we making change and outcome versus whose headshot's going to be on this. And so I love your heart for this work. I see your passion for it. I see your orientation for it, and I'm just honored and blessed to be in community and solidarity with you. So whatever I can do for you, please do let me know.
You're a little too good, bud.